Okay, thank you very much. Welcome to Breckland Council Planning Committee. Hopefully you have all made yourselves known to the usher. If you wish to speak on an application and have used the NHS track and trace system by checking in with the QR code on the entrance doors to the building, but obviously this is at your own discretion. In line with the national relaxation of the COVID rules, we are advising everyone to follow the government guidance. This means social distancing where practical to do so, and the wearing of face masks will be supported but not mandated for staff, members and visitors to the building. And hand sanitizers, as you can see, have been provided. These measures taken together with the help to assure the safety of everyone using the building and help us to avoid the spread of COVID. The fire exits are located, there are two in this room on this side wall. There's another one at the end of the lobby where the toilets are situated, and of course the door where you entered this building. There's not a fire drill planned today, so if you hear the fire alarm and it goes off, we will vacate the room and congregate together in the car park, and we will all wait to see the fire brigade come and put the fire out. Or what? We might get a flood more than a fire today, I'm not sure. Toilets are located in the corridor, and an audio recording of this planning meeting will be taken and copies are available on request. Either speak to the usher or who can take your details or email democraticservices@breckland.gov.uk. This meeting will also be live streamed on Breckland Council's social media channel. Mobile phones and other equipment may also be used to audio record, film, tweet or blog from this meeting by any individual member, council member or a member of the public. Could I just also say to you, which is not on my little script here, that can you ensure that your mobile phone and devices are put onto silent so they don't disturb any presentation? No part of the meeting room is exempt from public filming, etc., unless the meeting resolves to go into private session. The use of images or recording arising from this is not under the council's control, but please only video the representatives of the application you are interested in, and only do so if you have that person's permission, unless as chairman I deem otherwise. Each speaker will be given a maximum of 3 minutes, or in the case of more than one objector or supporter wishing to speak, 3 minutes for each relevant group. The time will be allocated to a spokesperson or shared between the speakers for each group. Where an applicant and that agent intend to speak, the 3 minutes is split between the two. Unfortunately, it is not possible to give an exact time when an application will be heard, as the allotted times have been removed for this meeting. Speakers in attendance will be asked to make their way to the seats on my right-hand side, and after each application, the microphones, etc., will be sanitized. Once you've finished speaking, you will be asked to remain in your seat so that members can ask you, if needed, any questions they may have. As for rules on voting, if the first vote is lost in considering an application, a new proposal will be requested. Example, a vote for approval, if lost, does not automatically mean refused. On a tied vote, I as chairman will have the casting vote if I choose to use it. It is also necessary for summary reasons for approvals or refusals to be identified in each case. I now introduce my team for the day. On my left-hand side, I have Mike Horn, who's solicitor to the council, Rebecca Collins, who's our head of planning. At the end of the table, we've got Simon Wood, head of development services, and sitting hidden up over the side there, we've got Fiona Hunter, principal planning officer. We also have Chris Hobson. Chris, put your hand up, please. We can see you, principal planning officer. We have Hugh Coggles, who's our tree and countryside officer. And we have also Andy Darcy. I haven't got Andy's policy manager. There we go. Sorry about that, Andy. I'll get that right another time. Okay, so now we will continue with the meeting, and we start with item 1, which is the minutes from our last meeting. I trust you've all read, and no one wishes to raise questions, so can I have your assistance in approving these minutes? Approved? Agreed, thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutes. Teresa, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have had apologies this morning from councillors Bowles, Crane, Keith Martin and Marion Chapman-Allen And our substitutes here this morning are councillors councillors Mark Kiddle-Morris and councillor Linda Monument. Thank you.
Good, thank you very much for filling in, guys. Appreciate you being here. Declarations of interest and representations are received. We will take them as each item is raised. Chairman's announcements. I put a couple of dates on here, but I'm not sure why I put them. Why did I put those?
Panel dates.
Oh, panel dates. Yes, just to remind you, panel dates. We've got some members' assistance needed on 16th of December and in good time for 14th of April, which is a long way off. So if we can try and cover off the 16th of December, if you like to check your diaries and make yourself available if possible. That was what we needed to raise on that. But then I didn't know what that was. I thought that was 2 dates when I might get a day off, but obviously not. Item 5, do we have any requests to defer items on this agenda? None today. Any items on item 6 of urgent business? None on that. Okay, so number 7 on our agenda is the local plan update, and I'll hand you over to Simon Wood, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'll be brief. Members will be aware that at Cabinet on the 20th September, Cabinet resolved to start a single policy partial review and a substantive full review of the local plan, together with a consultation period on the statement of community involvement. The report and recommendation and decision have been called into Overview and Scrutiny Commission, Chairman, and will be considered at the Commission on the 28th of October. So it probably wouldn't be appropriate for me to discuss the report in any detail.
Okay, that's virtually said to you, don't ask questions. So do we have any questions though that would not touch that at all? I didn't think so. Oh, yes, we do. Councillor Attewell.
Just to say, Chairman, that I was one of the members that called it into Overview and Scrutiny, and I have written subsequently to the Chairman of Overview and Scrutiny asking him if he would consider having a special meeting to discuss that earlier than the 28th. I realised that the urgency of the situation. As yet, I haven't had a response, but that's probably not unusual, but I perhaps need to ring him and just say, did you get my email? But I did copy that into the Director of Place as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for highlighting that, Councillor. Okay, we now have item 8, which is the 5-year housing land supply issue, and that's Andy Darcy. I'd like for him to take a seat and get plugged in or whatever he needs to do. Over to you, please, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a report on the annual 5-year housing and land supply update. It's a requirement of the National Planning Policy Framework to prepare and produce a 5-year housing land supply statement on an annual basis. The first step in this work is assessing how many houses we are required to find over the next 5 years. The process for that is set out in the report. You take the base figure of 612 dwellings requirement per year, multiply that by 5 and add in any shortfall that has occurred in delivery since the plan period. Despite COVID, if you like, last year, the district still saw 551 dwellings completed, which is an excellent figure in my opinion. But it's still a shortfall against the 612. So the total requirement over the next 5 years is 3,985 dwellings. We then look at the supply side, and the council has been very proactive over recent years in approving new sites for development, with currently over 13,000 dwellings with planning permission yet to be completed across the district. The report takes a cautious approach in assessing delivery from the sites with planning permission, and where appropriate applies up to a 25% discount rate on anticipated delivery rates. Particularly worth mentioning is now the involvement of Homes England in the Attleborough Strategic Urban Extension. that once finalised, we would expect delivery of that site to accelerate beyond the usual estimated delivery rates. Since the report was published on the agenda, we have noticed an oversight of the omission of one site, which has now been added in to the calculation. So the new 5-year housing land supply figure is 5.63 and not 5.59 as set out in the agenda item. But in conclusion, Chairman, the report does recommend and suggest that the council can demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land for future use in development management decision making. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions at all? We've got Councillor Attwell and then Councillor Clark and then Councillor Kybird.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the report. That is pleasing, despite the fact we've been in a pandemic. That's good news. The only query I had looking at the report was the Thetford Sue Sustainable Urban Development, and I think for Attleborough as well. And looking at you don't seem to have any houses coming online anytime soon. I think looking at that, there was a 0 in every year for the next 5 years. When are we actually going to get something built? Unless I read that wrong, but looking at my spreadsheet on here this morning, I'm just concerned that obviously a lot hangs on that with this 5-year land supply.
Sorry, yes, the report does make some allowance for delivery from the Thetford SUE from the sites that have got reserve matters and that are currently on site being built. The Attleborough one, the delivery for that, because it is still in planning terms at outline stage, we're still waiting for the first reserve matters from Homes England to come through. So the allowance from that is cautious and isn't anticipated to start until year 3 of the 5-year supply.
Councillor Attwell.
Sorry.
So assuming we do get reserve matters application come through and pass, will that significantly increase our figures going forward? Because I'm assuming that's coming not in the not too distant future, I believe.
Yeah, I'll just pick that up because I'm more involved with that than Andrew is. We anticipate the reserve matters from Homes England for Attleborough to be coming in the first part of next year. They're hoping to be on site within 12 to 18 months as a maximum. They've got an accelerated delivery program, which, as Andy said in his introduction, means that the assumptions we've made for delivery in the first 3 years will probably be exceeded, which will have a positive impact on the 5-year housing land supply.
Sorry, okay. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for your report, Andy. Looking at the process, which is the same as we've used before, got a number of questions around that. You've got an assumption, obviously, of a discount where we don't actually hear anything. Presumably you have data, I'm not suggesting that be above the line, but you have data where you don't get response from developers in terms of their build out rate and starting and so forth. And sometimes that's, in terms of monitoring, that's sometimes a resource capacity issue internally. So that's one question. Do you have that data? And we hope, as Councillor Attwell said, that isn't those major applications. The second one is where we've got some starts which are late. So, for example, I've looked at some, happen to be in my own ward, where we've got a couple of 0s and there isn't a start date until, say, 22, 23. That may well be a movable fee. So I'm assuming that you will have to then adjust those figures accordingly. And talking to other colleagues, we're also interested in our own wards about where we have particular developments we obviously want to see completed as soon as possible, all sorts of understandable reasons for residents and communities. So that have to be adjusted, obviously, with not just with COVID, but with the price of materials and so forth, that may affect the build out rate. So the two questions are, one about the assumptions and how far you can guesstimate the effect, which is obviously how long is a piece of string. But the first principal question is around where you don't actually hear from those developers. Thank you, Andy and Simon.
Thank you. Yes, the process is that we contact the agents, developers of the major sites of 10 or more on 2 occasions, seeking confirmation of our estimated delivery rates over the next 5 years. As you say, if we don't hear from them, we take a cautious approach based on sort of the national building rates for the purpose of this report at 45 dwellings per annum. In terms of outline permissions only, where we would anticipate the need for reserve matters, discharge of conditions, etc., we don't make any allowance for development until year 3 to allow that to happen. So there is that gap. Now, clearly, if there are future appeals against refusal of planning permission where the 5-year land supply is questioned, if you like, we will take a careful look at where it is being questioned, on what sites, and seek to provide updated information where possible on those sites to update the report in as robust a way as possible. But what we try to do is to be consistent across the sites where we haven't heard from back from the developer or the agent in terms of applying a similar approach for sites that have got outline or reserve matters. So if, for example, we don't hear back on a site that has reserve matters, but in the system there have been approvals for a discharge of conditions, etc., we would assume that that site is a lot nearer to starting on site than one that simply has outline. So the report and the tables try to reflect that approach.
Thank you. Happy with that? Fine. Okay, thank you. Councillor Kybird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As regards the Thetford Zoo, the delivery against the outline is listed as 0, but the 2 subsequent lines are detailed applications. One is described as Red House, but that is part of the zoo. So there is delivery there, and I understand the 3rd parcel of land is about to enter the reserved matters stage. As regards table 4, which gives the local plan trajectory, we've got a figure of 586 for the current year, and that steps up to 1,321 in 2 years' time. There seems to be an artifact of the methodology. I don't see that step change in delivery actually happening.
The Thetford figures are based on the trajectory rates provided to us. They were one of the people that did get back to us in terms of delivery. The step change that they're in order for the local plan to meet its requirement across the plan period, even based against the trajectory in the local plan, there has to be a step change at some point. Attleborough will be key, I think, in future delivery of housing within the district, and it will be very interesting to see what delivery rates come forward from Homes England in terms of that site moving forward. As the report says, the council does have a lot of a large land bank, if you like, of sites with permission at over 13,000. So a lot of the work has been done in terms of at least getting past the outline stage. So moving on to reserve matters will hopefully enable that a step change in delivery, but obviously we'll monitor it on an annual basis and see how it's looking.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from councillors? No, good. Okay, we'll move on now. Thanks very much, Andy. Our next item, item 9, is a TPO at Shibden, Bullock Park, Mill Road. We've got Hugh Coggles, our Tree and Countryside officer here. And speakers on this, we've got Samantha Shelley of the Parish Council. Sorry. And Paul Chubbuck, the chairman of Bullock Park, and Councillor Paul Hewitt, who's the ward rep. If you'd like to come and sit on the right-hand side, please, or walk out of the room, whichever's more acceptable. I gather Mr. Chubbuck's not back yet. Yes, that's fine. Our speaker, Mr. Chubbuck's been delayed at the dentist's, and I was going to put the item on this afternoon at 2:30. There we go. The old ones are the best ones. Okay, thank you. Over to you then, please, Hugh.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this is a TPO that was served at Shibden Bullock Park, covering 2 woodlands. So it's one order covering 2 separate areas of woodland. A woodland order protects all the trees that are in the woodland at the time when the order was served, as well as any trees that may grow as a result of the natural regeneration. So the 2 woodlands, woodland 1 is under the management from Shibden Parish Council, and woodland 2 is under the management of Bullock Park Management Group. Both parties have their woodlands surveyed on an annual basis by a local arboricultural association approved consultant and contractor who do a very good job of identifying any tree works that need to be undertaken, both for good management or for health and safety reasons. So both the Parish Council and the committee group are doing the right thing by having their trees looked at. What I had noticed over the last few years was that the standard of tree work, particularly in woodland 1, was very bad, and that some trees which appeared to be in good health had been felled. I was a little bit concerned because I know the standard of the tree reports are excellent. So I asked the contractor or the consultant for a copy of the tree report, had a look through it, and could see that a lot of the work that was being undertaken wasn't recommended by them. And certainly the standard of the work was unacceptable. So yeah, these are the 2 woodlands, woodland 1, woodland 2, just taken from the aerial picture on the boundaries of Bullock Park. Next picture, that's a view of woodland 1 as you come into the park. That's woodland 1 as you're standing in the park looking from the play area. And that's woodland 2, the one that's under the management of the Bullock Park Management Committee. So I think the next slide, this is one of the trees that sort of made me concerned, which was a mature horse chestnut tree, which hadn't had any notable defects identified. And as far as I can remember, hadn't had any work specified, but was felled. I think the reason given for the Parish Council gave for felling the tree was that children were playing around some of the roots that were exposed on the bank, and they believed this was dangerous. The next photograph, this is just this is some of the tree work that's been undertaken on the boundary with the houses on woodland 1. I don't think you need to know anything about trees or tree surgery to see that is extremely poor. It's in no way within the current guidelines of the British Standard or best practice. And effectively, it would have been better just to fell those trees. Those trees will now decline over a period of years, and what you'll end up with is a couple of rotten stumps. I think the next slide is just more of the same. And again, more of the same. So my concern is that although the Parish Council and the management group are on the outset are doing the right thing, that at some point they're receiving some bad advice, and the bad advice isn't coming from the people that are doing the survey. The bad advice is coming from another party, a contractor who is undertaking a lot of work in both woodlands. I can't really emphasize enough the poor standard of the work, creating long-term problems. It's damaging to both woodlands. So the preservation order is the intention is to prevent this work from happening, prevent this work from happening, and enable us at Breckland Council to work alongside both the Parish Council and the management group to ensure that the tree work in future is appropriate and in accordance with good practice. I just lost my thread a bit there, sorry. So yeah, sorry, yeah, I know both parties are very concerned that this is going to put a lot of extra work on their behalf and create a lot of paperwork and prevent work from happening. And this shouldn't be seen to be the case. There are other parishes in the Breckland district that have preservation orders on their trees. They work very closely with us. Some of the other parishes also use the same consultant to do their surveys. And generally what happens is each year when they've done the survey, the parish council submits the survey, it comes to us as their tree works application and we approve it because we know all the work that's specified is appropriate and not damaging. So I'm hoping that that will be the case with both Shibden Parish and the management group. So in the future, we can ensure that we can work together and make sure that these woodlands are retained successfully rather than being whittled away and damaged. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Samantha Shelley of the Shibden Parish Council. Oh, Councillor Hewitt.
Chair, can I speak on behalf of the Bullock Park Management Committee first? Because I have been sent a report from them, which was sent to you, and Paul Chubbuck was going to present that report himself. Or would you like to read the report out?
No, I wouldn't. No, but I've got a list here and I'd prefer to go through the Parish Council first, if you don't
That's
mind.
fine.
And then I'll allow you time to speak as if you were, we don't have to change your accent, but to speak as if you were Paul Chubbuck on behalf of them. And then I will take you at the end, if you don't mind. Ms. Shelley, what position are you on the Parish Council, please?
I'm a parish councillor.
Okay, Parish Council, that's fine. Okay, no. Mr. Chubbuck's here as well. Good to see you, sir. We've already had the joke about putting your time to 2:30, so don't even bother with that one. If you'd like to come sit on the right-hand side, we'll take you in a moment after the Parish Council. Okay, terrific. Just to let you know, you have 3 minutes now, and at the end of that time, I will ring my bell, and that just means if you'd like to just sum up. All right, and that doesn't mean 15 minutes more. That just means finish what you're saying. Okay, thank you very much. You've got 3 minutes then.
Thank you very much, Chairman and Committee. I'm speaking here on behalf of Shibden Parish Council, who work in very close collaboration with the Bullock Park Management Committee in maintaining a very well presented and supported recreation ground in Shibden, which is very heavily used. This piece of woodland forms part of the recreation ground for the village and can never be developed in any way other than for recreational use. Therefore, there will never be any intention to remove W2 piece of woodland in the future. I know this was one of the concerns. Bullock Park Management Committee works very closely in partnership with Shibden Parish Council in the maintenance of this woodland, and the woodland is inspected on an annual basis by qualified arborists, and this we have to do as it's a public open space and it forms part of our legal risk assessment on the ground. The 3 grounds of which you as a council concern the TPO to be ordered is that the woodland is an important landscape feature, and we do not disagree with this. It is part of Bullock Park, identified in a 1920s agreement and cannot be sold for development or used for anything other than recreation, and so will always remain a landscape feature. The second was that there has been unnecessary felling. All but 1 tree in W2 has been felled because of disease and safety concerns, and these removals were done on the advice of specialists. In some cases, rather than completely removing a diseased tree, all branches have been removed from the tree, leaving just the trunk. This has been done because of the large number of woodpeckers in this area, as we have found that they like to feed on the bugs under the dead bark, and the children love to come and listen to the woodpeckers, and removing those trunks would reduce the amount of trees available for the woodpeckers and the other birds and bats and insects that use the ivy and things that grow up them. We do accept that 1 healthy tree in the entrance of W2 within the last year has been removed. This was removed because of visibility problems in entering the park. Bullock Park Management Committee tried very hard to gain improved visibility by moving the entrance to the park, which would have meant no trees being removed. But unfortunately, the Highways Planning Officer advised that if full planning permission was applied for to move the entrance, it would be removed. On the poor standard pruning work, over the last few years, pruning has been carried out by a qualified professional company who are fully qualified NPTC and RFSs and are fully insured and work to BS 3998 standard. Whilst we understand the reasoning for having a TPO system, in this case, we believe that it is not beneficial for all of the reasons that I've provided. A TPO puts an unnecessary level of bureaucracy to a volunteer-based management committee to have to deal with. This volunteer committee is manned by people who give up their free time to run the park, and having a TPO in place would put another barrier in place to stop people from volunteering to run this successful recreation ground. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And Mr. Chadwick, please, you have 3 minutes as well, sir. Mr. Chadwick's the chairman of the Bullock Park. I've got Bullock Park, but it's association, is it?
Sorry?
It just says you're chairman of Bullock Park. But
Yeah,
it's
Bullock Park Management Committee.
Management Committee. That's the other bit. Thank you. 3 minutes, sir.
In response to report 2.1, this is correct. We only take down trees that are unsafe. We're only dealing with the professional opinion from your officer. We take professional opinions from a tree inspection, and also whoever gets the job after quotations of removing the trees. 2.2 in your report. The very last paragraph of the two-page objection letter that we sent in, only the very last paragraph of that report was actually put in your report, which I don't think is particularly fair. We have not seen your tempo assessment, so we can't understand how you've come to your tempo assessment. But we do note that the trees within the park, the lime trees have a 200 to 300 year life expectancy, and the beech trees have 150 to 200 year life expectancy. I would suggest that them trees are within them age ranges. I think the committee, as was said earlier by the parish chairman, over the last 3 years, we have put in 300 new trees and hedge plants at the park. And we've been successful in attaining a grant this year for another 200 trees from the Woodland Trust. So we're not really in the business of just pulling trees down. We don't want to pull them down. We want to keep trees there, but we accept we have to deal with the ones that are diseased. It was said also about the woodpeckers. Yes, I accept there is one tree, or more than one actually, which have been left as described as a totem pole. We have a number of green and spotted woodpeckers within that park, and they do like to feed onto the bugs which are under the bark. That's the end of my report. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Now, Councillor Hewitt, please, 3 minutes as well, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Panel, I need to start with an apology. You've got many important things to think about this morning, and this, to be honest, isn't one of them. I tried to get this disagreement ultimately between professional advisors resolved in private rather than being it out in public. But in opposing this TPO, my comments are very simple. The output, paragraph 10.3 in your report, can be achieved by people working and talking together rather than having a blanket TPO imposed with all of the hassles it caused. We've heard the Parish Council and the Bullock Park Committee take their tree work seriously. We spend thousands of pounds on annual surveys, RAG surveys, pruning, arbology programs, and so on and so forth. On more than one occasion, we have, on a request from a resident, said, no, that tree needs to stay up. But trees at the Bullock Park are mature and occasionally fail. They fail without warning. They overlook neighbouring properties. Part of the Bullock Park, particularly the areas we've identified, are waterlogged. The horse chestnut identified in the report was cut down because of excessive rain, making the elements of soil eroding, and actually the Parish Council had to answer quickly for health and safety concerns. And we do that ourselves as a district council. One of the major trees in Shipton at the Bullock Park entrance, an apparently healthy tree, was cut down without warning on health and safety grounds in order to protect the fact that it might subsequently fail. It's disappointing that this TPO was imposed before any conversations or consultation took place. It is unnecessary, it is premature, and it will not stop unauthorised works taking place by neighbouring residents. But maybe that's what we want to happen. Maybe in unilaterally imposing a blanket TPO, we can stand up to the little guy. But that is not the way we as a district want to consult and liaise with the communities that we represent. There's no doubting that the ambition of this report is sound. We want to protect trees for future generations. But the ambitions of paragraph 10.3 can be achieved through collaboration. That's the way we as a council want to engage with communities, not through the bullying or the draconian imposition of regulation when it is not necessary. To impose a TPO in this way, I contend, is the wrong approach. It's the wrong message, given in the wrong way, in the wrong form. Thank you.
Thank you. 4 questions. Rebecca, you'd like to say a few words, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, your responsibility today in terms of considering the TPO is, are the trees worthy of a tree preservation order? Your requirement is, as a local planning authority, to make a tree preservation if it appears to them, to yourselves, to be expedient in the interest of the amenity to make provision for the preservation of trees or woodlands in their area. You cannot take into account who manages those trees and where those trees are. The question is it expedient in the interest of amenity to make provision for the preservation of trees and woodlands in that area? You've heard from the tree officer today that he feels that those trees are worthy of a tree preservation order. He has made that appropriate assessment. It is now up to you as members to consider whether those trees are expedient in the interest of the amenity of the area to make provision for a tree preservation order and make a decision on that basis, not on the basis of who owns the trees or how bureaucratic the process is. Obviously, you'll note from the officer report that we will always and always do work as closely as possible to ensure that the trees are preserved for their amenity reasons and for no other reasons. Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, who, please?
I just wanted to make it clear that there is absolutely no objection at all to the felling of trees which are diseased or dangerous, and the TPO will not prevent that in any way. And as regards to the trees that needed to be felled that have been left as totem poles, that's commendable. It's great. It's really good for the wildlife. It's good for the bugs and the beetles and the wildlife, etc. The objection is the trees that were perfectly healthy that have been left as totem poles, which are predominantly in Woodland 1, not within the Bullock Park Management Committee group. So where healthy trees are left as totem poles, where there's no requirement for it, then that's where the problem is. So it's not really the question of trees. I accept that there has been one tree which I feel was felled unnecessarily, which was the horse chestnut tree, which I'd shown you, which the professional survey said that didn't need to be felled. But the problem is with after the professional survey, the other person who is saying that they're a professional person is undertaking very poor, unnecessary work that certainly isn't in accordance with the British standard. Whether or not their website says that they undertake work in accordance with the British standard isn't really relevant. The work that they are undertaking is absolutely appalling. So that is really my main concern. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from the members. Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Hugh, can I just go over the process? So what you're expecting is these guys to send you an annual report, because they have to have an annual inspection done by a specialist who will send you that report on an annual basis with a recommendation in there for works that need to be carried out. And then do you subsequently, do you agree that report? Are you just asking for sight of that? Or will you go to site subsequently and inspect any work was carried out? Can you just explain to the committee how that works, please?
Well, a good example is Wissenset Parish Council who have a number of TPO trees. They have the same company undertake their survey every year. So generally what they do is if the survey flags any works that need to be done to the TPO trees, they send in the application with a copy of the report from Ravencrofts who have undertaken the survey. I go out and have a look and I've been here for 7 years and to date I've never had any works that we've needed to refuse. It's all been appropriate work that needs to be undertaken, or it would be preferable to be undertaken. So the bureaucracy and the paperwork, the application form for undertaking works to a TPO tree is I think 3 or 4 sides of box filling, name, address, and the description of work you would put as per the submitted report. The council has up to 8 weeks to get a decision back. Generally, we're much quicker than that. So and then the permission is valid for 2 years. So it's very, very little in the way of paperwork.
Just to clarify, they submit the forms, but that is not individual forms for individual trees. That would be one set of forms for the wood for that annual inspection they've had with recommendations.
Yes, it would be one form. And as an example, there's a box that says the description of work that you are applying for. In that box, you would write as per the submitted tree survey dated, whatever. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions from members at all? Councillor Wilkinson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, could I ask the Parish Council and the Bullock Park Management gentlemen, did you find the works carried out acceptable, which has been pointed out by our tree officer that there was just devastated those trees, and in his words, left as totem poles? If you don't accept that work as satisfactory, then why would you not support keeping the TPO where you would have then the support of the district's professional tree officer?
Who would like to put their head in that noose? Ah, Mr. Bullock.
I don't mind. Mr. Bullock. Well, that's close, isn't it? I can only really speak for the wood that we're responsible for. And I am quite pleased with what's been done. We've actually used a number of contractors over the years, but we've only ever used the one tree survey, which is done on an annual basis in the last 5 years. We have used others in the past, but I can only speak for our wood. I'm quite pleased, you know, the wood that we look after, I'm quite pleased with the work that's been done. We have had trees fail after inspection, to be fair, and we have had to make decisions later on in the year when we actually had branches fall off trees. And I'm not talking about a little tiny branch the size of your arm. I'm talking about, in one case, there was a branch fell off. I couldn't physically move it. It had to be cut up. The inspection is that moment in time inspection. So obviously he might look at the tree work in the winter time, but come the summertime, the trees look different. So the answer to your question, on our wood, what we're responsible for, I'm very pleased with what's been done in the past.
Thank you. Who, if you'd like to just give an additive to that, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to emphasise that actually the work in your woodland 2, is not where those photographs are taken from. They're all taken from Woodland 1, which is under the management of the Parish Council, and that's where the poorest work has been undertaken. With regards to emergency situations, as you've explained, if a branch falls or if a tree fails or if there's a tree that becomes an immediate threat, an application isn't required for that. So all I'd ask is that you would just notify the council and say, we've got a branch that's hanging or we've got a tree that looks like it's going to fall over immediately. That those things are exempt from the need to put in an application. So dead trees, dead branches, or anything that's failed or hanging or an immediate threat, then you don't need to go through the process of putting an application in. But that work can be undertaken as an exemption.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from members at all? Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. It's a comment, really. The current Breckland Council, I applaud the plea to talk to each other. The councils and the management committee are transient beings, but the trees will be there for 200 years. So putting a TPO in place protects them for that length of time, rather than for, we may fall out, we may not talk to each other in 20 years' time, and that's what the purpose of the TPO would be. Thank you.
Thank you. We always need to talk to you, Councillor. Any more questions at all before we move on? No, thank you very much. Okay, so recommendation on this item 9 at Shibden Bullock Park is that we confirm the TPO order. Could I have a show of hands, please, for confirmation? That's unanimous. Okay, thank you. That's confirmed. You are going to stay in place apart from Mr. Chubbuck. See, rushed all the way from the dentist and you're done and away home now. Okay, so we're moving on to item 11A, 3PL 2021-0625, Shibdom, the old Wagon and Horses, Chapel Street, of which we have our two speakers in place. And we're just cleaning down that mic, so that's done out of the way. And okay, super. Oh, yes. No, that's part of the one. Oh, yeah, I've got on my list here. We do have a deferred application, but that's being taken a little bit later in the agenda. Sorry, I've got one on here and one on there. I've got two sheets going, you see, and I'm trying to juggle. That's okay. It's my fault. I should have mentioned the deferred application for later. Okay, over to you, please, Chris.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. So we have item 11D in Shipton also. It's the former Wagon and Horses public house, apologies, Chapel Street, Shipton. So you can see the site edged red on the screen there. So the proposals before you members are to demolish buildings on site. So we have the former public house and a single-story hot food takeaway building. We'll see some photos shortly. But in terms of the application before you, see the site edge red. It's one that members will recall. It's had a long history, both in terms of this part of the site, but also the adjacent site to the east and to the north. And of particular note, members may recall an application which was refused in 2019 for the loss of the garage, no replacement facility on site. I'll move on to that in a moment once we're discussing the application and its merits. But the application site is obviously there, edge red. We've got a residential context east and west and to the south of Chapel Street, which runs immediately to the south of the site. So there's kind of that surrounding context. So see the A1075 running immediately south of the application site. Residential properties to the east and west. Got the former coal yard to the north. The next slide, so we can see within the site to the north, that benefits from consent for 90 dwellings. We've got an allocated site then that sits adjacent to that. That's allocated for 55 units. And also of note, you can just about make out the line here, this magenta line. That's the edge of the conservation area. So the application site before you sits here, just inside. So we'll be touching some of the considerations for the conservation area shortly. Also of note is a consent for residential development to the south of Chapel Street in this area here. In terms of the site, so we can see this is a view from within the conservation area and the site there, the public house, adjacent buildings, single-story buildings there. Closer view, here we are, the public house, garage there, single-story buildings. That's the corresponding view the other way. So looking back towards the conservation area and the site here. So this is the site here. Again, the adjacent site concerning the garage is adjacent to the site. Again, view on Chapel Street, and that's some context in terms of the area to the rear, the former coal yard. So in terms of the proposals, touch on those in a minute. The applications set out in pages 121 to 137 committee report pack, but also some additional comments within the supplementary report. Those include consultative comments and those comments from Councillor Linda Turner. So the application before you, so is this part of the site here, the greyed out areas beyond the application site in the area edge blue. The proposals are for 7 affordable units. Those will be 2 and 3 bed units, 5 3 beds and 2 2 beds. We've got a row of 3 along the site frontage, with 4 running along the access road here. So this would serve the already consented scheme to the north. And to the right, in the edge area edge blue, we have a convenience store that's already consented, and 8 residential units here. The access aligns with those consented within the wider scheme on the site. In terms of the units themselves, the scheme has been amended through the application to provide a more traditional frontage and elevation composition. These are those units along the street front. We've got the 2 bed units, all of traditional form and appearance. And there's the street scene along this Chapel Street. We've got the 3 units on the left and the permitted convenience store to the right. So in terms of some of the history, I've touched on it. We can see the scheme that's been permitted to the north. The sites here. Here's the already consented scheme. So we can see, as mentioned, the residential units, the convenience store. But as part of this scheme that's being considered today, we also have the 7 units, affordable units. Those would not replace the retail facilities along the frontage. So those comprise office, hot food takeaway, and dog grooming unit. Also a car garage. So that's located in the northwest corner of the site. Now, in terms of key issues before you, we'll touch on those in a minute. But in terms of the comments from the Parish Council, I think those probably highlight the main kind of issues here in terms of some of the history with the site. The Parish Council have not raised objections. However, they have highlighted concerns about the approach taken with the site, the overall circumstances in terms of the existing units on site, the car garage, hot food takeaway. Those in terms of the kind of how the approach has been taken to the site, and also the impact that has on the facilities, business opportunities within the village. We've also had 8 objections. Those follow similar kind of themes and concerns in terms of the impacts on the facilities, employment within the village. So in terms of the key issues here, the key matters really resolve around the principle. So in that regard, policy Como 4 of the local plan that highlights the loss of community facilities, i.e. the retail space, will only be allowed where it can be demonstrated that there is no local need for the facility. So the evidence submitted in support of the application identifies current existing provision in the village and the surrounding area. It's also sought to consider demand for such facilities and notes a lack of demand within the other similar facilities in the surrounding area. It's also considered future retail kind of markets. In terms of, it's also provided a financial appraisal of the consented scheme, so which included the retail units to the site frontage. Highlights within the report both i.e. within the consented scheme for the new units, but also if the if the applicants decided to refurbish the existing units, both options would provide a negative return. So taking on into that into account, but also the other matters highlighted in policy EC04, that's of particular importance as well. That looks at the loss of employment space within rural areas. In terms of the site here, you know, part of the considerations in this policy is whether you know, it highlights that those schemes that would result in the loss of employment uses would be considered on their merits and weighed in the balance. So, but also when that's done, considering the long-term sustainability of the location, site constraints and existing and future demand. Having reviewed the submission, the additional evidence submitted, the good kind of provision within the village already, and the size and location of the garage that was consented, in relation to surrounding proposed uses, and also considering that those kind of business tenants have already either found an alternative site or closed. You know, that also has to be considered in the balance. Also of importance is policy EC05, and that seeks to maintain the role of local service centres. So obviously the scheme here would remove the retail uses on site, but also would not provide a replacement use on site. So in that regard, there is considered to be a conflict. I mean, in terms of conclusion on main kind of aspects here, it is a fine decision here. I think in this instance, the scheme proposes 100% affordable homes, and the benefits of those are considered to outweigh the harm caused when considering what kind of provision is in the village in terms of the types of uses that are consented, but also when you consider the existing and future market trends, but also having regard to any kind of scheme now that would come forward on this part of the site would have to be a speculative scheme, and also having regard to the financial appraisal in that regard. I think its officers' views that the harm would not be so large to outweigh the benefits that we would see in terms of the 100% affordable provision. In terms of some of those other merits, so we've touched on the location in terms of the conservation area. The scheme's been amended through the application to provide more traditional frontage to Chapel Street. There's also been improvements in terms of landscaping. The historic buildings officer has raised no objections. In terms of highways and access, the scheme's also been amended through the application to remove direct vehicle access off Chapel Street to plot 9. So in this location here, also scheme ensures appropriate visibility from the junction and within the site. In terms of amenity, there's no unacceptable impacts in terms of existing residents, and proposals provide acceptable separation on site. In terms of other issues, ecology, you'll see the comments in the supplementary report. There's no objections from the ecology team, having now seen the updated ecology report. And also in terms of drainage, there's no unacceptable impacts in that regard. So in terms of conclusion, it's one of those that is for members. It's a finely judged scheme. There is clearly some gains from the affordable housing provision. There's also impacts in terms of not providing the consented or providing a replacement retail space, loss of the car garage. It's officers' views that having regard to all those kind of themes and issues, having touched on just now, overall it's considered that the benefits outweigh that limited harm. The recommendation includes the need to secure the affordable units through a Section 106 agreement, and as set out in the report is recommended for approval subject to those conditions and a legal agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, before we move on, did we have a street view, or is it not acceptable without? Oh, we did. Ah, because of the other unit, which is not in this application. Oh, I can see it. Yeah, that's fine. It's a bit dark, but that's probably being in Shibden. Maybe that was late in the afternoon. Okay, it's very dark in Shibden. It's a good job you're there to light it up, Mr. Councillor Hewitt. Okay, we've got Councillor Shelley, please, of the Parish Council. 15 minutes, please. 15 minutes. Let me put my teeth in. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First and foremost, Shibden Parish Council recognise that we cannot object in planning terms to the current application as submitted. However, there are a number of issues we wish to put on record. We're very disappointed by the lack of understanding in the design and access statement, where the village is incorrectly labelled as a town and there are other sloppy errors. It's unacceptable in the current climate and given the significance of the development that the applicant can't even be bothered to carry out a rudimentary check of the environment and wider community in which the development is being placed. The current application appears to replace that of 3PL 2021-005 EAR, which previously was approved with a garage, dog groomer and fish and chip shop. This application was initially hard fought and hard won by the local community, given the initial removal of the garage and other businesses at an earlier stage in the application process. On one occasion, a decision to remove those businesses was criticised by the planning committee and rejected on the grounds that it was contrary to the rural development rural employment objectives enshrined and promoted within the new local plan. The fact that the garage business has had its lease cancelled and the other businesses treated in a similar fashion in order to get vacant possession of the site does not diminish the fact that this site originally received permission for small rural business opportunities, which now it does not. This is contrary to the spirit of the new local plan and cannot and should not be condoned in any way. The supporting information to the application refers to a vacant site, derelict premises and dilapidation beyond repair. Neither of these conditions existed when the application was first made, and as mentioned above, should not be considered a supporting argument to promote the application on the grounds that the vacancy, dilapidation and relating dereliction was due to deliberate actions of the applicant and nothing more. As mentioned, the site used to be occupied by a number of small businesses, including a very popular fast food outlet, the only one in the village, which is open after 4 p.m. And the deliberate and planned removal of these raises questions as to the sustainability of the development without travelling outside the village, despite the welcome addition of affordable houses. I would like to point out that anybody who's recently visited any of the new developments within the last 3 or 4 years in the area, that the number of parking spaces allocated for these number of 2- and 3-bedroom houses are wholly inappropriate. Parking is a major issue in the village. We do not have the luxury of on-street parking in a lot of areas. And the number of parking spaces for the number of 2- and 3-bedroom houses is just absolutely outrageous. Notwithstanding these comments, Shibden Parish Council guardedly welcomes an application with the specific that the conditions that all the dwellings are affordable dwellings are stated, and it's envisaged that 100% of the dwellings will be provided for the mixed tenure housing to be provided by a registered provider in the design and access statement. As a parish council, we want it noted that this provision should be accepted as such and at face value, rather than subsequently be negotiated down on the basis of affordability or economic viability.
Thank you. Councillor Hewitt, please, 3 minutes, sir.
Ladies, gents, this application does split local opinion.
On the one hand, you see the argument, get on with it already. You know, this site has been to and from you with more variation than Joseph's Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's been refused, it's been appealed, it's been deferred, it's been agreed, it's been refused with an employment loss, even though it's been agreed, and now it's before you again. I think some of you think that the only thing in Shipton is a defunct garage and a co-op. But on the other hand, with just one exception, which we'll see later, as outlined in the detailed consultation response by the Parish Council, I think this application represents one of the most cynical manipulations of our planning system over the last few years. The justification for an agreement of the development as outlined by the commercial statement, as reiterated by our officer, paragraphs 1.8 through 1.10, is tenuous at best. The landlord foreclosed on the tenancy agreement which offered employment locally. The businesses that were in situ needs to close down or relocate, rendering the buildings derelict. And now a justification for residential rather than commercial use is that it brings derelict buildings back into use and there is no localized business need. That's neither the meaning of nor the ambition behind EL 05 and COM 04 in our local plan. It is the commercial equivalent justification of repopulating following ethnic cleansing. And that is nothing that we can and should promote or be proud of. So I don't know how cynical you feel about this application. You could, like the Parish Council, guardedly welcome it with 100% affordable housing as meeting a local housing target, as long as that 100% target is not subsequently bartered down on economic viability, which I suspect it will be. You could take a view that villages like Shipton or Swanton Morley don't deserve economic growth and input. All they want is a pub and a post office, as long as they themselves will continue for the lack of sustainable employment opportunities. Or you could just take the money and run. This is a housing target. It meets our housing target. Getting this site sorted will free up the site opposite, as was pointed out by the officer. In other words, it doesn't matter what the outcome will end up being, we'll just spend a few wills to get what we want. But I think our new local plan and our community deserves more. Your call.
Thank you. Rebecca, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to say, councillors, you're considering the application in front of you, which is for 100% affordable housing, not what may or may happen in the future, unfortunately. I think, you know, obviously we've seen at this committee and in a number of applications, the previous applications before the local plan that were permitted at 40% affordable housing, and we've come to you and we said the new policy is 25% and that's viable, and that's what we're recommending on that basis. The key difference with this application is that the affordable housing is a key material consideration in the determination of this application. And therefore, the officer's report is really clear that the proposal doesn't comply with COM 04, as you set out at the previous committee. You weren't happy that the loss of the garage in particular met the requirements of policy COM 04, and you refused planning permission on that basis. Perfectly acceptable to do so. What we are now saying to you is the 100% affordable housing set out in this application outweighs the loss of that community facility with having regard to that reason for refusal. And we've recommended on that basis. Now it's up to you, members, to consider our recommendation on that basis. And obviously you can take a different view that the affordable housing does not outweigh the loss of those community facilities in accordance with COM 04 and recommend on that basis. What you can't consider today, members, is whether in the future or not, we may or may not receive an alternative planning application. Thank you.
There we go. It's open to questions from members. I've got Councillor Clark, then Councillor Atwell, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a question for the officer. Going through the report, which I've read twice, so I know Shipton well, looking at the comments of the Housing Enablement Officer, particularly pertinent in the last paragraph where they talk about the very small space for 3-bed, 6-person houses. Now, later on in the conclusion of the officer's report, it says amendments have been, I think I'm right in reading, been submitted which satisfy that, but just for the avoidance of doubt, because I think we're all concerned about space as well as design, which the Parish Council's highlighted. If you could confirm, Chris, that all those national space requirements have been met, you know, to the full, because we wouldn't want to approve anything that is going to end up with a, you know, a shoddy scheme at the very least in terms of space. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Clark. Yeah, just to confirm, yeah, the scheme has been amended. So you might see these particular units here are now slightly larger than those adjoining. So yeah, the comments from the Housing Enabling Officer have been taken on board. The scheme amended to address those. One of the comments that that they did raise was that they would rather see the difference between the two and 3 bed split. At the minute, it's proposed for 5 3-beds, 2 2-beds. They'd rather see that split the other way around. Now, in terms of the considerations here, they are for all affordable. The strategic housing market assessment, the latest evidence we got requires there's a clear need for 3 beds. So in this instance, given that the proposals provide those 3 beds as a higher proportion and the others 2 beds, again, also a need, the mix is considered to be appropriate. So okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Attwall, please.
Yeah, could I just talk about this map on here in the round, the whole map, because I'd just like some clarification, please. So the first clarification is the road, does that form part of this application? That does. Okay, so if this doesn't go ahead, what happens to the application previously approved for the larger development at the back? That development depends on this road access, right? No?
Yeah, no. There's been a number of schemes and applications as highlighted by the Parish Council. There is already a consented scheme for the road. What they have done is made sure that the road here aligns with those already permitted schemes. So the residential developments north can take place without this. Similarly, the area to the right-hand side of the image, so the convenience store and other units, that's the consent there also aligns with the access. So actually, either of them could be brought forward independent.
Right. So my concern with this, with regard to the application that's previously been approved, is we're now looking at the loss of 2 or 3 business premises that originally approved. So there's going to be no fish and chip shop, no dog grooming, and we're wholly reliant then on this convenience store going ahead. Because if this applicant comes back at a later date and decides, well, I don't think I'm going to bother putting a convenience store in, I'm going to put in another application to build some houses on the front end because I can make more money. Now, hang on, don't jump in, because you're going to say that's not relevant, but it is relevant. It is relevant because Shibden is a large service centre village. It is a large growing village, and we can't keep throwing houses in these villages without helping them improve the facilities and the amenities that they have to sustain those communities. So I have to say, on planning balance here, I don't agree with these houses being built. I think we should stick out and we should have the retail units. Anybody can put one of these viability things together and say, well, I can't make that pay. I don't agree with that. I think we've got a duty, if these communities are going to grow, as per our local plan, we've got to put those sustainable business units in there. Can't keep taking them away. Eventually, you'll just end up with dormitory villages if we don't do something about this and make a stand. Thank you.
Okay. So, yeah, you're absolutely correct. And I think you said exactly what I was saying. It's up to members to consider whether they consider the policy complies with COMO 4 or not, and whether the loss of those. So there's 2 elements. There's, do you agree, as set out in the Officer's report, that the information submitted, including the viability assessment, is sufficient to demonstrate that compliance with COMO 4? As Councillor Hewitt has completely pointed out, he believes, and I have to use the word believes, that the applicant has initiated that process to get to that conclusion, and members are perfectly within their remit to agree with that. Officers have made a professional assessment of that information that's submitted and believe that that information submitted and the process of events to date has led to compliance with policy COM04. But members, you may sit here today, and as Councillor Attwell has pointed out to you, and say that there is non-compliance with policy COM04 because of the information, and that the loss of those units isn't acceptable in accordance with COM04 and is not outweighed in the planning balance by the gain of the affordable housing, the 100% affordable housing. So it is your assessment in that regard. Our assessment to you as officers is we consider that 100% affordable housing scheme, given that there is other retail within Shipton, including a dog groomers, another garage, another shop in the post office, that we believe the loss of those units and the availability of being able to get takeaways from Dereham, the loss of those units does not materially outweigh the benefit of providing affordable housing. Obviously, members, it is within your remit to take an alternative decision.
Coming back.
So if I heard that correctly, I agree with most of what you say. It is up to the members, but basically what you're saying is, from a sustainability point of view, we're quite happy for people to have to get in their cars and travel to Dereham to get the takeaways rather than get their fish and chips in the village where they are. It might not be that you particularly get a dog grooming unit or a fish and chip shop move in there, but the fact that you'd have the retail units, surely that is a serious consideration for this council. It is for members, but I don't think that argument really stacks up, Rebecca. If we're saying, well, we're quite happy for people to get their takeaways from Dereham, I don't think that's acceptable when we've got the opportunity of providing that within walking distance within the village. We have issued a climate statement as a council, so I think we've got to take some account of these things, haven't we, for the environment?
Okay, thank you. I've got Councillor Kybird, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there any reason why COM04 isn't listed as one of the policy considerations? Because it does seem to be rather key to this. And if I look on page 117, there's no mention of COM04 being of relevance.
No, that's just a human error, Councillor Kybird. It is referenced several times in the report, though.
Okay, any further questions from members at all? Councillor Monument, please.
I'm here as a substitute, so I haven't been a witness to the previous things that have gone on here. I am just catching up, not having been on planning very often in the last 15 years. What happens generally when somebody has business premises and wants to convert it to residential? I thought that it was deemed necessary to attempt to advertise at proper rates the properties that you've got that are commercial and prove that it is not viable. Is that what this person has done? And has he advertised them, or is that only applied to, used to apply to public houses, I think? It seems to me that simply getting vacant possession of commercial properties shouldn't really be enough. And although there has been a decline in retail because people can buy things online, there are some things you cannot buy online very easily. And I would have said that fish and chips is one. Getting your dog groomed is not possible virtually. And most cars do actually need to go into a garage, even if they then use fancy IT stuff to analyze it. So it seems to me that this area was providing useful services, and I quite agree with the others who said, what's sustainable about everybody having to drive 5 miles, and I do know the distance quite well, 5 miles into Dereham in order to fetch their fish and chips or other food? We should be maintaining, it's going to be a service area, we should be promoting, because it seems to me there's no such thing as standing still. If you don't promote growth, things decline. And I think Shibden as a village seems to me to be rather at risk of being forced to decline, in spite of the fact that we've classified it as a service area.
Thank you. Thank you. In terms of the question, in terms of policy COM04, there is an either or option essentially. So it does state that essentially the loss of community facilities would only be allowed where it can be proven that there is no local need for the facility, or the option again is to provide or prove that there's been no demand via marketing. So the policy is an either or. So the proposals before you have been considered against the first scenario, where you prove that there's no local need for the facility.
Yeah, Mr. Horn, then I'll take Councillor Kittle-Morris.
Members, it seems to me that your decision process should be along the lines of the following. Obviously, including everything else that you put in here, but particularly as regards COM04. Question 1, do you think that there is compliance with this policy? Having considered everything, do you as members consider that you are happy that there is compliance with this policy? Yes or no? If it is yes, then I'm presuming, or because I haven't heard of any other reasons that you are thinking of refusing this, then I would presume that if your answer is yes, there is overall compliance with COM04, you will grant permission. If you conclude that there isn't, then you look at the other material considerations, i.e. the affordable housing. You then decide whether, despite, in that instance, non-compliance with COM04, whether there are other material considerations that, in your opinion, override that non-compliance. That should be the decision-making process. But if you disagree with officers for the reasons that I've just set out, that's perfectly acceptable.
Okay, Councillor Kittle-Morris, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Like Councillor Monument, I'm a guest speaker here, so I'm not familiar with the history of that particular site. Can you please tell me from the plan that's on the screen, the right-hand side of that road, is that subject to an approved planning application? And is it going to go ahead? I mean, do you know?
That's better. Yeah, first question, yes, correct. There is a consented scheme for that. It's extant. So in terms of whether, if a scheme will go ahead, that's something that as an authority we can never, yeah. No, hasn't started on site, no.
Okay, any further questions from members at all? No, okay, thank you. So for this item, Shibdom, which is 3PL 2021-0625, and this is a full application. Your officer's recommendation is one of approval. Could I have a show of hands, please? 2, and those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and from the floor, please, would someone like, Councillor Atwell, please.
Contravention of COM04.
What he said.
So members conclude that there is a non-compliance with COM04, and there are the other material considerations do not override that non-compliance.
Okay, so with that, then the recommendation to refuse, could I have a show of hands for refusing the application on the grounds that you've put forward? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and those against that? 2, 7, 2 still. Okay, so that item is refused. Thank you very much. Members, I'd just like to have a quick tea break of 10 minutes only, please. So if you want to get yourself a cup of tea and or coffee and move back here, you've got 10 minutes. We'll start at 25 to 12. Could I also just ask you